It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. I'm really excited about our guest today, Mary Knight. What a wonderful woman. I got to say, you got to check out her film, Am I Crazy? It's a documentary film she self-made about her life. It's so personal and so intimate and so touching. And her search for her to explore her memories of her child's sexual abuse. You can find all this at her website, maryknight-productions.com. And she's got a book coming out in November. I hope she'll come back in November when the book finally comes out. It's called Becoming Mrs. Brown, Essays by a Child Sex Trafficking Survivor. And once again, this is such a miserable topic. We've covered it so many times, but it is important to get out there and kind of get the mainstream world out there acquainted with this horrible phenomenon going out that it's really being unaddressed in mainstream media. Mary Knight, are you there?
Yes. And I wanted to tell everyone my last name is K-N-I-G-H-T. So it's Mary and then K-N-I-G-H-T Productions.com.
Good idea. Thank you very much. Mary Knight Productions. So tell us about yourself, though. Who is Mary Knight?
Right now, I'm going on a walk, which is one of my favorite things to do. I walk 10 to 20 miles a week on these trails by my house. And there's deer. This morning, I followed a bunny for a little while. So there's lots of good things in my life. I'm happily married. I got married for the second time in 2010. And we are grandparents. We have 6 grandchildren that were all born since the time we got married, and so I enjoy spending time with them. And one of my favorite things to do is volunteer in the lunchroom at my grandkids' school, and 3 of them go to the same school, so I get to have just a short conversation with each of them when I volunteer in the lunchroom. My husband and I are respite foster parents. Respite foster care is when you take care of children when the full-time foster parents need a break. So we normally take care of children just for a weekend. And one of our kids is back with his biological mom, who is providing a safe home for him. At this time, she's a good mother. She was in a bad situation, but she's a good mother. And we fly him. He moved to another state, but we fly him in to see us every summer. So he just recently left after a 2-week stay at our house. So we got, and one of the other kids who stayed in our house will be adopted soon at age 13. So we're really excited for him. I think foster care is needed all over the world for children. I also write, of course, finishing my memoir. And one thing I did with my memoir is I have trouble reading a memoir when someone has a really tragic life like I have had. And so I divided it into essays, and most of my essays, and each essay has trigger warnings. So most of my essays are not very triggering, but a few of them are extremely triggering. So I have that posted so you can choose not to read the extremely triggering one, or maybe choose when to read it. I do have a fictional story in it, which I think is a great bedtime story for grown-ups. But those triggering ones you don't want to read right before bed, of course. And I just renewed my social work license. I was a social worker for over 20 years, and I decided now that I'm not going to make any more feature-length films. I'll make some more short ones. And I'm about finished with my memoir. What do I want to do next? And it really surprised me that I decided to renew my foster care license, my social work license, so that I can do play therapy with children. So I'll be doing play therapy with children from about the ages of 4 to 11, and I'm excited about that. And I think that, the other thing is I'm healthy now, and I did have extreme chronic pain, fibromyalgia, as a result of the child abuse. So that's something else I would say about my life is it's so hard when you're in pain just all the time, and I used to be. But I've done a lot of things to get well, and they're included in my memoir, or if you want information right away about that, I do have part of the list is up on my website under the How I Healed page. So I recommend, it's the things I recommend. And I will say it's such a process to heal. I do still take antidepressants. I do still have sleep issues, nightmares. Not all the time, but I do still have them. Last night I had a nightmare. So I think one thing for survivors is you have to consider that healing, you don't necessarily, you can have a happy life before you're completely healed. And that's the case for me.
What a beautiful intro there. Once again, I remind the audience, it's a Mary Knight Productions. The video we're talking about today is Am I Crazy? And the book coming out in November is Becoming Mrs. Brown, Essays by a child sex trafficking survivor. Now, you had said to me, how many years were you a social worker?
23 years.
Okay, now during your work as a social worker back around then, I'm assuming, having watched your video, Am I Crazy, that at that time you had not yet remembered the abuse that you had occurred during your childhood?
When I remembered, I was already working as a social worker. I already had a master's degree in social work, and I had already placed 100 kids in adoptive homes. I started out as an adoption worker, and I was doing parenting time evaluations, court-ordered, so judges would appoint me when in a disputed custody case, and I testified in court. And I think that's one thing that helped me have more confidence in myself, and I think it is one thing that got me ready to remember my abuse.
Now, at the time, did you notice any indications in the families you were evaluating and the children you were evaluating that perhaps they were going through this kind of occult ritual abuse?
I did not have cases that I think that were where a child was being. See, what happens is if the child's being abused, normally the parent goes to Child Protective Services, and Child Protective Services handles it. I got the cases that Child Protective Services either said, we don't see abuse, and sometimes they were wrong. So I did work with kids who had been abused, but usually they were, most of my cases involved other things, like maybe a parent was an alcoholic, that sometimes they were both trying to be good parents and they both wanted custody and they fought over small things like how to cut the child's hair. And then other times neither one were very good parents, but both wanted custody. So, no, I didn't have, I had one case. It was in about, I remembered in 1993, and this was in about 1995, 1996, where the mother had a childhood like mine, and her attorney had missed a court hearing, and her mother had gotten weekend visitation once a month, and I do believe her mother was an abuser, but, the court had already spoken on that, and the father was trying to get custody. The mother was an excellent mother. Kindergarten teachers said this child was the best adjusted child in class, and there was no reason to take custody away from the mother, and the child would have been in more risk. Not necessarily because of the father, something the father would do, but the father would have let the child be with the maternal relatives more, which I thought was risky. So, no, I didn't. I wasn't finding a lot in my caseload.
I'd love to have you back one day just to talk about the whole court-ordered custody evaluation system. It's just a nightmare. That whole system is just. I don't think anybody's benefiting at all from that whole mess. Oh my God, yeah. And there's a lot of corruption too. It's just outrageous. Some of the stuff I've seen, especially in Nevada, in the Clark County system. Now, why don't we create a baseline here and give us an idea of what you experienced as a child?
I was sexually abused from my earliest memory, and I was sex trafficked starting at age 4 or 5 or 6. I have one memory that goes back to 4, a memory where I literally saw money exchange hands, where I literally saw my mother take money from men. I was 6 or almost 6 at that time. And I do write about these in detail in an essay in my memoir, as examples of ritualistic abuse and also examples of child sex trafficking, which I was victimized in both, and also child pornography, which the ritual abuse I think was often and maybe usually, possibly always filmed, and so my father had really good camera equipment, and he was a good photographer. I mean, people look at photos he takes that I have that obviously aren't child pornography, or I would turn those into the authorities, but he did good with lighting and that type of thing. He had professional lights. So, so I was abused in all those ways. I continued to be sexually abused in incest. I was sexually abused by both parents, and I have memories of incest in my teens, and also of being taken to men's hotel rooms in my teens. So it was my entire childhood.
And some of this was like satanic in nature too, as well?
Well, and the definition of satanic, it varies with different people, but I don't know what was going on in my parents' mind. I don't know if this was a way to make some child pornography that would sell for a lot of money. I have an essay on my website. It's going to be in my memoir, but it's also available right now free on my website. My parents were KKK members and pedophiles, and it tells about an incident that could be considered satanic. I mean, there was a white cross involved there, or it could be considered KKK, or it could be considered child pornography was made. So, in my view, it's hard for the victim to know who these groups were because, we're not told. We're not told. I saw money exchange hands, so I know I'm a victim of child sex trafficking, but some ritual abuse survivors didn't see money exchanged hands, but the things that happened to them were exactly like the things that happened to me. So the victim doesn't always know. And I don't know what was going on in my parents' mind. And I used to want to know, and I think my film shows that I kind of released myself from that. And I haven't mentioned my upcoming film yet, but I will, in November, I will be premiering my film Mothers and Molestation, a film about child abuse. And in it, you can see me coming to terms with my mother. In the first film, Am I Crazy? My Journey to Determine If My Memories Are True, you see me coming to terms with my father on camera.
Now, what was your home-like life? The average person listening to this and they hear, well, there was some type of ritual abuse going on here. They think, well, was this a house filled, was it painted black? Were there pentagrams everywhere? Were there candles? Were the parents on methamphetamine? You know, describe what your home life was like.
My parents were not addicted to substances. My mother's father is now alcoholic, but my parents were not. They went to a conservative Christian church and did not drink alcohol. They were college educated, which, you know, that means I was in the 50s, I was born to a college educated woman, which, you know, was more rare back then. And they were very intelligent, well-read. They appeared perfect on the outside. My mother made some of my clothes, and I was very well dressed. I mean, she could design clothes. She had been a home economics major. So there was nothing, the abuse was very well hidden.
Now,
and we were upper middle class. I mean, it wasn't, my dad had a good job. He worked at Boeing, and he had a good job.
He worked at Boeing?
Yes.
Okay, see, that's not unusual either. You hear a lot of this stuff going on around the military-industrial complex there. Now, in the film I Am Crazy, you describe an incident with your sister and a coffin. Now, can you describe that to us?
Yes. So my sister, Ruth Ramsey, she died at age 11 of cancer. It was brain cancer. I know it was. And
okay.
I visited her in the hospital. She was not murdered. But after she died, the funeral home employee, who may or may not have been the funeral home director, I have looked, you know, tried to find the funeral home director, but it doesn't, he couldn't have done all the work. The funeral home has to have more than one person doing the work. So anyway, the funeral home employee or director picked up my sister's body at the hospital, which is usual. But what was unusual is he brought it to my childhood church, and then in the middle of the night, in the wee hours of the morning, my parents cut my sister's body with a knife, and in fact made me cut her body, and then they put her mutilated body in a coffin in the hearse, and they, or it may have, as I'm saying that, I'm not sure whether it was the hearse or whether it was our station wagon that the coffin was put in, but I was put in the coffin with my sister's body. And one way I know it's true is that I would have thought I'd be squeamish and horrified to be put in the coffin, but I was still a little girl, and this was my sister, and I remember touching her hair. I remember that I was glad to get to be close to her.
Now, so for this to take place, okay, at least one individual involved with the funeral home and at least one individual involved with the church had to be complicit in this. Am I correct?
Right, but my parents were highly involved in the church, so it didn't have to be someone other than them, although I was raped by other church leaders at that church. So there were good people at that church, and there were abusers at that church, both. But my father, he helped. He was a Boeing engineer. He helped build the church. He literally helped several of the men. Most of them worked at Boeing, did the labor on the church. I mean, it would not be unusual for him to be on church property. It's odd to be on church property at that time. But the church property, it was a tree, there were trees around it, which I've been back. My husband's a forester, and he said they would have been the same trees because he knows how to determine the age of trees, and of course smaller then. And but it was somewhat hidden from the road, and I mean, I think someone could still get away with that now at the same church, because you just go back into where the trees are, so yeah. But my parents were highly involved in the church.
I'm curious because I'm working on something else right now where, again, a survivor too he was buried. He was buried in a ceremony. Now, since you've come out with this story about the coffin, have people reached out to you and described this similar situation?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then tell me, what else do you know about that?
Well, one thing, I talked to one friend, and she's a survivor of ritual abuse, and she's excellent. She has a very strong psychotherapy practice, and she said it's amazing how many of us were put in coffins. And I talked to other people who were put in coffins. I don't think it's unusual in ritual abuse. And I talked to someone in India that I met at a conference, and she was saying she thought, I mean, they have different traditions in India, and they don't bury, they dispose of the body differently, but you know, she thinks it happens there too. So I mean, it's very terrorizing to the child, anything that's related to death, of course. And I just can't say enough about how, you know, you want your loved one's body to be well cared for. And it was really upsetting to me that would happen to my sister's body. And there was more that happened in the ritual after that, and I can't say for sure that all of it was, can't say for sure that, well, they tricked me afterwards. They said that to desecrate communion, they said that they put her body in my mouth and made me eat it, and that they also made me drink her blood. Well, more recently, fairly recently, I'm 66 now, and when I was about 60, I remembered that it wasn't, I remembered the taste of it, and it was a communion wafer. It wasn't even the kind of communion wafer we used at our church. It was a communion wafer like if used in Methodist and Presbyterian churches. It really, maybe the same kind as Catholic. It's
that kind of flat, perfectly round, yeah, right.
Flat little round thing. And
right.
We can never use that. We use matzah, which is the Jewish kind of flatbread. And I think they were trying to terrorize me so that it would be hard for me to take communion, not only at my own church, but if I ever went to another church, it would still be hard. But the good news is that it did not desecrate communion for me, and I love to take communion. I think it's a beautiful, symbolic, I see it as symbolic Christian, it's something I like to do.
So, okay, so that's the issue with the coffin there and the sister. We're talking today to Mary Knight. The website is called Mary Knight Productions, and that's Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, maryknight-productions.com. The film we're talking about is her first film video, which is really a very touching film. Am I Crazy? It's called, and it's not overproduced with all the sappy music and all that stuff. It's just really from the heart. I really enjoyed it. The next film is going to be called Mothers and Molestation. And there's a book coming out in November called Becoming Mrs. Brown, Essays by a Child Sex Trafficking Survivor. So now, Mary Knight, real quick, before we get it, because I want to ask you all about the film Am I Crazy, and how you were able to get all those false memory syndrome people to sit down with you and really get them to really reveal the kind of people that they are. Okay, but before we get to that, when you started to realize what happened to you in your childhood, were you ever able to confront your parents while they were alive, and did they acknowledge this? How did that go?
They did not acknowledge it. I did confront them. I confronted it was really on the phone with both of them, although I did go and just visit my father after my mother died and not confront him, which was definitely an interesting experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I did it. I think I needed to know I could feel, empowered in his presence. And it was really I was just saying goodbye to him because my mother had died not long before. But then I later felt a sense of, I later confronted my father, and it was around the time that I divorced my first husband. And my mother, she would send me letters sometimes, and I talked to her on the phone. I remember what I think was the last time, and she said, "Well, I'll be talking to you again." And I said, I don't know that that's the case. And I think that was my last phone call to her. She died in, I think, 1997, which was 4 years after I remembered my abuse. And then my father died 10 years after my mother. So, yeah, I feel like I did confront my parents to the extent I could. But the confrontation at their grave, my own counselor said what she likes about that film is it shows that, no matter what, you can still do what you need to do to come to terms with the abuse, even if your parent is deceased. They knew about my memories, and they denied they had done anything wrong. I got a really odd letter from my father giving all these details I didn't even know, and then saying it wasn't true. And I got a letter from my mom basically saying we were too busy doing church work to do anything like that to you. I really like having the footage of me confronting on the grave. It helps me to just go back and look at that.
I would tell any prospective filmmakers out there, like the whole scene with the saran wrap. When you have something like that happen, leave it in. That's so real, and it's so true. And so many of these kids, I guess we could both say these kids today, let's do another shot, and let's cut away to to the scenery and then put some music in there. Just do the real thing. People want what's real, what's reality, And I'd love to see those letters. I wish you would include them in the next book if you could. That would be beautiful. Now, how would you describe the film, I Am Crazy?
Well, the full title is Am I Crazy? My Journey to Determine If My Memories Are True. And that's really what it was about. I came up with that idea after I had been disbelieved by someone important to me. Well, I tried to get into a MFA, Masters of Fine Arts program, and they wouldn't let me in, and I think it's because they didn't. I know my writing's not great. That's why I was trying to get in, or it wasn't great. But they really wanted proof of the things they'd said, and I had no proof. I wrote an essay in my application to them that what it now is the essay my parents were KKK members and pedophiles. Anyway, so then I just woke up, because I'd also thought about doing a documentary. I woke up with the title, Am I Crazy? And I thought, if I really, on camera, truly question my memories, that not only will be interesting to an audience, but it will be good for me. And my parents, I thought of them as very powerful people. I think survivors often think of their parents as very powerful people. Mine made good investments on real estate, and I know that when they died, they were multimillionaires. And you know, there's power that comes with that. There's power that comes with their church involvement. Anyway, I wanted to question them in a powerful way, and camera is powerful. Mm. So I called the founder of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Her number is no longer available on the internet, but then it was. I just found her phone number and called her, and she answered her phone. So when I got that interview, I think it helped me get the other interviews. And I think she was willing to be interviewed because she thought she could convince me my memories weren't true. And her daughter, she would like her daughter to quit believing. I mean, her daughter remembers paternal incest, and she doesn't want her daughter to believe that. And I guess I'm not commenting on whether Pam Fry knows for a fact that her daughter was abused or not. I really don't know if she's in denial, if she's, you know, what she saw, but she's aware of enough that parent, that a good mother would have. There were red flags that based on my interview, she acknowledged things that would be upsetting to any good mother.
Well, let me ask you a question, because earlier you said to me that there was really no proof. Okay, and I hear that all the time. I have no proof, you know. But have you ever sat down with an attorney and a real investigator and really gone over your life to see if you can come up with any kind of corroborating witnesses? There's so many diaries. There's so many things. Have you ever really sat down and tried?
I have talked to a DA because as a social worker and then a survivor advocate, I've, you know, had those kind of relationships. And yes, I've talked to some attorneys, and I've called the police, and I've tried to contact the FBI, and nothing has come of any of that. The problem with it. It might be different in my case if recovered memories were more seen as credible, because I have 5 relatives with similar memories, but they're all recovered memories. So if I do have what, you know, to me seems like corroboration, because I have relatives that when I would remember something, then I call a cousin and they'd say, yeah, the same thing or very similar thing.
Well, and your father wrote you a letter, though, that confirms other details?
Well, I mean, there are things I didn't know about something that happened at this one wedding, and, you know, where they went then and where they went then. I mean, there were just details in it that I didn't know, but I don't know that those details are correct. And I mean, his point was it didn't happen, but yeah, he included some details that I hadn't told anyone because I didn't know. But maybe one of my other relatives did. I don't know. I don't think so, though. I think I talked to them. But that's not proof either. So yeah, I have talked to people. I think the thing I'm doing that by going so public, that if there are other, you know, that there may be some good results from being so public. But yeah, the other thing about being aware of what is evidence. I mean, I was a forensic social worker for 13 years. I knew what was considered evidence because I needed to know in order to testify. I only had one case where I testified in criminal court, but I routinely testified in civil court. And I also knew in my parenting time evaluations what I could use and what I couldn't, what kind of proof I needed for it to stand up in court. And I just don't have any of that. I have one photograph of me and my sister where it looks like we're wearing little bikinis, but we're really wearing red sheer lingerie, which I think is inappropriate. But it's not it's not enough to be considered. It's not enough to be turned in for. Let
me ask you a question, though. When you were working, I believe it's a forensic social worker, right?
Yes.
Did you ever evaluate a situation and say, yes, there's definitely abuse going here, but the person you're trying to assist is telling you, I have no proof?
No, because they usually would have gone to Child Protective Services already. No. Did I ever say that I believed a child was being abused based on the child's statements? Yes, I did do that.
Okay, but my point is, though, is that I deal with these cases so often, and the survivor is always telling me there's not enough proof. But the other, just think of the irony here, that here you are, like you said, you're a forensic social worker and a mandatory reporter. And then when you go and try and report your own abuse, they say, well, sorry, there ain't enough there.
Right.
That's just...
They don't. Yeah.
The irony.
They counted it based on being recovered memories.
Yeah.
They said that even if a child recovered memories because I did call about one situation where it was a 17-year-old, so that's still under Child Protective Services. Mm-hmm. And they said, no, we can't investigate what she's remembering because she's remembering she didn't have continuous memory. And it's like she's 17 years old, and you can't investigate. She's still a child. She just didn't have continuous memory from the time of the abuse. And they said, no, we can't do that. They said, you could go to the police. I said, what will the police do? Well, they won't do it either. I mean, a real problem is how recovered memories are being thought of. And that's one reason I made my film, is that it's if they weren't recovered memories, the likelihood I would be able to, my situation would be much different. Now, in Washington State, Lynn Crook is in my film, but she had a sister with continuous memories, and she had a couple of other items of proof. She's writing a book. It'll come out before mine, I think, about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, but she tells about the proof she had, and she won a civil lawsuit, but and I've read what the judge's opinion or the judge's findings on it, and what he went on, and one thing she had that the judge considered proof was that the father, who's a medical doctor, had done a pelvic exam on her sister when her sister was 22. And the judge said, no doctor in our town, would do that. I mean, every doctor in our town knows that's wrong. And it wasn't an emergency, of delivering a baby or something, but no, it was a routine pelvic exam, which is, so she did have some types of proof, but no, you can ask me anything. I just don't think, I don't have it. The letters from my father, from my mother, they just keep saying they're innocent. You could say my father's kind of an oddball from reading the letter, but you couldn't prove that he was a child molester. And I will say too, my siblings say I'm crazy. So that's they say it's not true, and I do have siblings who are alive. So yeah, I have some
hurdles.
Things.
Some hurdles, but they could be overcome. Now the thing is, too, you mentioned this. Lynn has a book coming out too. Could you put her in touch with me?
Yes.
Well, I'd love to have her promote the book on the show.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, no, of course. Okay. If anybody wants to send me, sure. False memory syndrome. Now, since by the way, when did this film come out? Am I crazy? My journey of memories are true.
2017 was the original one, but I didn't include some of the footage in the first one. And so the one just came out. I mean, it's premiered on Real Women, Real Stories just 2 weeks ago, and it already has 100,000 views.
It's amazing, right? How your video gets to, and these other outlets, they have some kind of formula that they use. I wonder how that works. But now let me. So 2017 though. So now, because these folks, all these false memory folks, they get paid a fortune to testify as expert witnesses. The Maxwell case, a Weinstein case, right? Now, is your video being used to cross-examine them?
I don't know. I do know that there's someone who has some of those connections who knows about my video. I think it is. I actually think it is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at least on the Weinstein case, because I interviewed Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, and she's the one, she testified Weinstein, and she was hired by Cosby's defense team. And anyway, she wasn't, on Weinstein, she wasn't allowed to talk about traumatic memory, which was a big improvement. And I didn't follow the Maxwell trial so much, but yeah, when I interviewed her, people had not heard of her. She hadn't testified for some time. And it's, because of the Me Too movement, there's been these court cases. I mean, I just have huge respect for people like Dylan Farrow and her brother to research and bring all this out. And so Elizabeth Loftus is testifying again. And I don't think that other people in the film have testified that I know of. But yeah.
And what a list of clients, Maxwell, Cosby, and Weinstein.
Right.
What a
Cosby.
What a life's work there. What a life's work to look back on with pride. You know what I mean? What have you done with your life? Well, those horrific people out there. Those are my clients.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
But no, we were talking about this off the air. We didn't get a chance to talk about this on the air. But the woman Goldstein, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that you interviewed.
Yes, Eleanor Goldstein.
And what is her title again?
She doesn't have a graduate degree. Well, she does. Let's see. Does she have a? Anyway, she had. She's not a memory expert by any means, but she has a daughter who recovered memories, and that's why she got involved. She lied to me on camera, saying she got involved because she felt sorry for these poor accused parents, but really she has been accused. And so yeah, her statement was just her statement minimizing abuse, which I will say other people with I've read things from books, but not something, well, I don't know, maybe something as blatant, but what she says on camera is so blatant that when I ask her if the child should be responsible to stop it, she said yes. And she kind of slugs my arm. It kind of hurt afterwards even. And then she said yes, the child should stop it. And then she said that child sexual touch was much to do about nothing.
Right.
It was like no big deal.
And you could see her body language. She just brushes it off. She just waves it off. It's just riveting. People got to check this out. Am I Crazy? This film by that's my notes from yesterday. Almost Mary Knight, maryknight-productions.com. Am I Crazy? My journey to recover memories are true. And then the book coming up, too. Keep an eye out for that, too. Becoming Mrs. Brown, Essays on Child Sex Trafficking Survivor. We're down to like a minute. I wanted to ask you so much. We got to have you back, definitely when the book comes out.
Okay. And I do want to say my book, it's not essays on child sex trafficking, but it's essays by a child sex trafficking survivor, being me. But some of the essays are really heartwarming, easy to read, and I have a long section on how I healed.
I would encourage anybody right now listening to this to really make the time and effort to check out maryknight-productions.com and watch this film, Am I Crazy? And you'll get a much greater appreciation of Mary Knight and the type of person she is. She's a very straightforward, genuine person who went into the lion's den. Okay, with these false memory people, and totally, like, it was like David and Goliath. She just pulled out her slingshot and she took him down. These are professional people, testify professionally for a living for many, many years, and they just tried to lie to you. They tried to blow you over there, and you really took your time and you did a great job, man. I'm very, very impressed. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. And my last name is spelled Knight, like Knight in Shining Armor.
There you go.
Maryknight Productions.
K-N-I-G-H-T. Maryknight Productions. Am I Crazy is the film. Another film coming out is Mothers and Molestation. And once again, in November, hopefully we'll see Mary Knight once again. The book is called Becoming Mrs. Brown, Essays by a Child Sex Trafficking Survivor. Thank you so much, Mary Knight.
Thank you.
Good night.